Serious. Divorced people of Reddit. What could have saved your marriage? Attention. Serious. Tag notice. Jokes, puns, and off-topic comments are not permitted in any comment, parent or child. Parent comments that aren't from the target group will be removed, along with their child replies. Report comments that violate these rules. Posts that have few relevant answers within the first hour, and posts that are not appropriate for the serious tag will be removed. Consider doing an AMA request instead. Thanks for your cooperation and enjoy the discussion. I am a bot, and this action was performed automatically. Please contact the moderators of this subreddit if you have any questions or concerns. If he hadn't had an affair with my best friend that I've known since the 2nd grade. Her youngest daughter is definitely his, and their daughter is 7 months younger than our daughter. The only time we are all together was at my mom's house at Christmas time for a couple of days. I found out 8 years later that my godbaby was my husband's child. We had been married 17 years then. We tried to make it work as roommates for the kids, and we had just bought our first house. But it didn't work and we had a bitter divorce. Seriously, fuck that piece of shit. She really needed to work on her mental health, and refused to do so until I had been checked out of the relationship for about 4-6 months. At that point, had to deal with 3 years of temperamental mood swings, her wanting a divorce every 6 months because I wasn't making enough money when already working 60-hour weeks. Then when I was working 80-hour weeks I wasn't cleaning the apartment, only time I was home I was asleep, so wasn't making it messy, and spending enough time with her. Or spending it with her so I didn't have time to make a mess or clean. Then she also required me to cook and do the dishes. Finally I told her the next time she says she wants a divorce I was done because I was literally killing myself to attempt to make her happy. I was so dead inside I was done. And then when she said she wanted a divorce because I was no longer the bubbly guy that made her laugh and smile, I just said okay, got up from the couch and went to bed. She was so pissed off. Over the next 2 months I only treated her as a roommate. She tried lying about how abusive I was. Lost a lot of mutual friends to those lies until they realized she was living with me still instead of trying to get out. They offered her rooms and her parents had a spare room for her that they knew about. All it would have taken though was her working on her mental health that just kept deteriorating and creating unrealistic expectations. I wish her the best, but I really feel bad for her future partners. Unless she makes significant changes, she is going to burn them to the ground with those expectations. We'll say within 2 weeks of her moving out my mental health was significantly better. Realized it when I took a lunch break, being WFH due to the virus, and stood up to make lunch. I felt light. And this was because all the stress I had prior due to her had been lifted. Don't stay in a shit relationship if it is literally causing you to feel weighed down by the stress of it. ETA. Thank you to everyone that has messaged, replied, or upvoted this. All I can ask, since this has to do with mental health, is please seek help if you need it. If a loved one needs it like my ex did, try to work them towards that. But if they refuse to, do not be afraid to walk away. It does not mean you are weak, but instead strong beyond your imagination for walking away from someone you love that refuses to seek the help they need. For men, do not be afraid to seek mental health help. You are so incredibly brave by doing so. I am proud of you for taking that step. For women, the exact same thing. So to both genders, now that we got that out of the way, take care of yourselves. You must take of yourself before you can care for others. I love you all. Stay safe, and stay healthy. I'll try to reply to those messages that keep coming in. Edit 2. I appreciate the awards so much, but please instead donate to a local mental health organization or something. Or even donate it to yourself and get yourself a treat on this Friday night. Like get a pizza and watch your favorite movie that always lifts your spirits. And with that, I am going to go watch Treasure Planet. My husband would do this over and over again. For 3-4 years he would get in these down moods and he literally would not speak to me for days at a time. I begged him to get help. I got help. I did everything I could think of until I had nothing else left. I was holding our marriage together all by myself. And when he said he wanted a divorce for the 100th time, I said, Me too. I was 3 months pregnant with our third child. 2 months later he wanted back. I was never going back to that roller coaster. It's been 31 years now and I never remarried. He did. I am forever happy. He is more miserable than ever, but he isn't my problem. Your first sentence is something a lot of people need to understand in a relationship. You can only fix your mental health, not someone else's. My ex would threaten divorce and eventually I was like, okay, that was that and we filed. Something I have done is mutual friends have said she said, insert whatever, and I always just respond with that's her side of the story. What you believe and do with it is your business. Most people will realize that there are two sides of the story and what they were told may be pretty far from what happened. I was married to the sweetest man. He was just always trying to prove himself to the world, always unhappy with his achievements, not masculine enough. Quite a nervous demeanor I can't really explain. He also drank more and more over the years. By the time we turned 40 we decided to divorce. We chose to not have children, so we felt it was fine to just let each other be. We're still friends, although over the past 4 years since the divorce we did grow apart of course, but we see each other regularly still. Then, a few months ago, he told me he went into therapy because as a child he had been sexually abused by a friend of the family. So there it is. I wonder ever since he told me that if he had confided in me or had gotten therapy earlier, in any way let the secret out, we would have stayed together. It makes me sad. All of it. Your ex-husband sounds like a former friend of mine. Ended our decade-long friendship just a little under 2 years ago, and he had a similar grouping of issues. Past sexual abuse he wasn't going to therapy for, a weight and self-confidence problem, drinking problem, and he had some covert narcissist patterns. He projects a lot of his insecurities about his masculinity and his sexuality onto other people. A real man does blah blah blah, gatekeeping BS, and a long list of attributes and such that he himself did not actually possess. If my ex didn't give up in therapy, once we identified my personal issues and I started working on it, and things didn't magically get better, it became apparent that she had issues to work on as well. Her response was, and these words are burned into my heart forever. No. I don't want to work on it anymore. I'm done. Edit. Didn't think this many people genuinely cared, let alone had similar experiences. I posted a lot more of my journey on my other Reddit account, but my ex found it and started to harass the fuck out of me on it, so I deleted and made a new one. Thank you for your kind words and messages. She had issues to work on as well. Her response was, and these words are burned into my heart forever. No. I don't want to work on it anymore. I wasn't married, but had assumed a stepfather role to her 2 youngest kids still living at home, and we had all bonded as a family, so I thought. She went into a bout of depression that she refused to acknowledge and didn't want to leave the couch for months. During this time she also became pathologically jealous of time invested in her daughter, and accused me of having too much interest in young girls. Long story short, it was tragic for me and for the kids, but to this day she doesn't think a thing of it. I paid for therapy for her for way too long after the point where the therapist and I agreed that I wasn't the problem. She steadfastly refused to address childhood traumas from decades ago, pretended to be fine, but acted out disruptively at random times because of them and cited them as the reason our relationship struggled. Her kids are now in their 30s and still occasionally in touch with me. 2 of the older ones haven't spoken to her in years, but by all accounts she still considers herself some kind of helpless victim in the whole affair. This is actually fairly common. Therapy is hard, and it takes both parties to commit to it. After separating, living apart, starting marital therapy, we called it quits. because we were both exhausted from the months of effort. I had one illness after another that I was having a hard time overcoming. My doctor finally said to reconcile or get a divorce. The in-between stage we were in was too stressful for my health. I ended up with pneumonia and my husband moved back in to take care of me. It took 9 weeks to recover. We used the skills we learned in therapy to continue to communicate effectively. After our first child was born 4 years later with severe medical issues, we returned to therapy twice a month to deal with the stress. 20 years later, we are still in therapy monthly and we use that time to check in with each other. We are happy together and just celebrated 28 years of marriage. I am so glad we put in the effort to make it work. All the best. Literally just asked for a divorce yesterday. Communication. She didn't tell me she was unhappy for 2 years. I didn't hear about any real thing she dislikes about the relationship until after she kissed someone else, and by then she was too unhappy to work on it. I never told her I was upset either. I would bury it until everything all came out at once. Created an environment where she always felt she was walking on eggshells and cultivated the fact that she could never communicate what she was feeling. So she felt unhappy, unloved, despite always hearing from me how proud I was of her, scratching her back, hugs, whatever, and decided to get that attention elsewhere. Both sides at fault. Communication though. Edit. Didn't intend to give a timeline here, but there's some confusion. Wife and guy work together for 2 years. Guy's wife decides to move family 4 hours away. Guy quits job. During last 5 weeks at work, wife and guy have played dates for our respective kids. He has 2 daughters, we have a son. They go to zoo, children's museum, etc. During this time, she and him sneak out every day after work to parking lot to hug, because he'll be leaving. Weirdest part of the story for me. Last day of work, guy kissed her. She enjoys it. A week later they have another date. She brings my son to his apartment to help him pack the last of their things. They also walk a local river. Guy leaves. I confront wife about him and express my discomfort. She denies, but we both agree we're unhappy. We agree to work on it, go to therapy separately to work on some issues. She texts him daily for 4 months. Are you okay? I miss you at work, etc. Sending him screenshots of our arguments, updating him on where we go, places we arrived at. Talk to you soon. She literally never leaves the house. We're always together or at work. They were always with kids. I'm 98% sure it was just the one kiss physically. I wish you could have a chat with my husband, because there is so much here that I relate to. I really admire you for recognizing your own flaws and your part in the divorce, but I'm really sorry about how things ended. I won't cheat on my husband, but so much resonates with me about feeling like walking on eggshells and being constantly unhappy and unloved. It's really mature of you to acknowledge your part in this, not just say my wife cheated on me, she's a bitch. I wish you the best of luck in your life moving forward. These are the things I've learned in 26 years, still married but almost divorced twice. Don't sweat the small shit, it's absolutely not worth it to either of you. Be willing to make compromises and look at the things from your partner's perspective, or simply in a way that doesn't place your views and feelings on a pedestal. Try your hardest not to be an uncompromising asshole. That's also not worth it, and both your lives will be much happier and more laid back. Be honest about your feelings and concerns, etc. Try your hardest to support each other and work as a team through the difficulties in your relationship and your life, and you will be able to conquer anything together. Edit. Also try to make time at least every couple of days to do something together that you both enjoy, even if it's only for an hour or 2. Like, watch TV, movie, go for a walk, eat out, paint Warhammer, listen to music, whatever, just something. You will cherish those times later and it will bring you closer together. I used to travel 150-200 days a year for my international recruitment job. I would be gone to Asia or Latin America for a few weeks and then come back for a week. But I was never really present when I was at home because I was so tired. I never cheated on her when I was on the road, like a lot of my colleagues did. but that really wasn't enough to keep the marriage going. She developed interests outside of the marriage and it ended. I think I should have turned down a few of the travel opportunities with my job to balance things out and be more present. But the money was so good, I thought that would ultimately make us happy. Him being honest about not wanting to marry me but doing so only because he didn't want to fess up to his mother that he wasn't ready. Me trusting my guts that told me that no 26-yo should have that kind of friendship with the 16-yo. Clarification: my then soon-to-be husband was the 26-yo. His church friend was the 16-yo. She knew me and knew about the wedding. Hindsight is a bitch. Not saved my marriage, but saved me from marrying. The first time, knowing my own core values and understanding my partner's core values. My first marriage lasted nearly 10 seconds as we existed in parallel, as parents. Our goals and more fundamentally, our values, never aligned. We were in our early 20s when we married and didn't know enough to have those discussions. We weren't really introspective enough to even define our own values. While there's always compromise in any relationship, I struggled with the compromises that infringed on my values. I realized this in couples therapy. My second marriage has a much stronger foundation. We both value education, learning, personal growth, community, and community service, integrity, adventure, authenticity and compassion. I feel very at peace in my relationship even though we are both driven individuals. We both turn toward each other when there are external stressors and we are committed to the relationship. We are open with each other and curious to know the other person. We admire and respect one another. It's quite nice. This right here, it's important to note, though you did hint at, a couple doesn't necessarily need to have the same values. They simply need to have compatible values for a long-lasting relationship to thrive. Too many people seem to base their relationships on hobbies or sex. Hobbies can change, looks can fade, interests wax and wane, physical ability isn't always guaranteed, money can come and go. While relationships can last a long time based on those things, I submit such relationships are rare, and still, fragile. But deep core values, much harder to change. Him doing the fucking dishes once in a while and not lying to me constantly about money. I should have been more viciously blunt in communication, which was my mistake, but I didn't understand why I had to constantly tell a grown man to help with house and child care. We both worked and I was also going to school. That said, divorce made him grow up little. He's an excellent father, has never missed a support payment, and we are better friends. Had this with a friend of mine. He didn't help with the 2 kids, didn't have a driving license to at least drive them around, went in and out of employment, acted like he would make the money and she would look after the family, except he never did and she had to take a part-time job. After 2 years they get divorced and, while it takes time, he eventually grows into a man who acts like a proper father. Actively wants to have his kids around more when he wouldn't look after them before. Got a stable job and seems much happier, even though he is divorced. Nothing. We grew apart. It was, however, the most amicable relationship, marriage, childbirth and divorce that you could imagine, even 10 years later. Hell, I go to Spain and stay in their house. I'm best friends with my ex-father-in-law. We often holiday together, and they do the same when they come back to this country. Grown adults don't need to be bitter to split up, they don't need to be nasty to each other after parting, they don't need to avoid each other for the rest of their lives, and there doesn't need to be anything wrong for you to realize that, even after a decade and a kid, it just isn't working anymore. The better question is now, would I want to have saved my marriage? We divorced very amicably and I don't look back on my ex with negative feelings. Around the time was a bit different. I did feel like a failure and was frustrated with them. Basically, I wish we had just waited a lot longer to decide to get married in the first place. My ex was like a good friend that I shouldn't have really been married to, just been good friends with. I don't know that they really wanted to be married to anyone, and I'm not sure we were quite the right marriage pair. I've since realized that my parents were right. If you're with someone you could be in a good marriage with, waiting won't hurt anything. hiring a house cleaner and having a list of handymen. I was stuck with all the chores and a full-time job. It was exhausting and I got crabby. He'd be lying on the sofa smoking weed and there was no way I could convince him to help out. It did not occur to me that there are people you can hire to do all that stuff. Pro tip: if you and your partner have a good income and are both employed, hire people to clean the house, mow the lawn and do handyman stuff.